Record on the cloud. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thanks for coming to another Sorry for All speaker event. Wanted to put this one together because there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the animation industry right now. And I'm sure it's probably scary for a lot of people, but it's also kind of exciting. And wanted to talk to somebody who has been in the business for quite a while and has thrived in the business and is kicking ass right now. So I want to introduce you all to Phil Allora.
Hi, everybody.
um
I know you're all virtually waving back to me. I can't see you, but I can imagine you are.
yeah, you would just kick us off like with a little bit just about where you've been, what you do, all that stuff.
For sure. All right. Well, before I start sharing screen, because I put together a little presentation for you all just to talk about some of the things that have been going on. Just to give you kind of some background, some of you may not know who I am and what I do. I'm currently a story artist working for Gaumont Animation. That is a French company. It's the oldest entertainment company in Europe, I believe. They are, they were in the process of making a feature film for Netflix. Bounced around the industry quite a bit, but just wanted to kind of give you a really brief background. I started off as a illustration major at School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, New York, and my intention was, from the time I was a kid, to break into comics. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell story visually through sequential art. And that's all I would ever read when I was a kid was comics. And that happened to really pay off later when I got into storyboarding. While I was there at SfA, I internshiped with Stephen Guarnaccia, who's an illustrator who's worked internationally and nationally through magazines. I was interning at his studio in my junior and senior year, where I kind of learned the basics of how to run my own studio, work with clients, work with running a shop, seeing how the ins and outs of the business go throughout the day. From there, after graduation, I set up my own studio and started taking freelance assignments wherever I could get my hands on them. Again, not all of them were in comics. Some were related to comics, which was fantastic. There was a couple of freelance assignments in marketing, as well as storyboard, comic strips, and a comic book. I was able to get some comic book work, for smaller independent publishers, which were not the big titles yet, but I felt like I was on the way. And about a year or so after graduating, while I was in the midst of doing all this, I was thinking, oh, great, I'm finally getting some traction, getting into the comic book industry and working. I answered a call for interns at the Walt Disney Studios, like SfA at that time. They would always throw out these invitations to graduates and current students to come and apply, put portfolios together and apply for these animation studios that are coming to the school to talk with them about joining their internship program. So at that time, I submitted a portfolio and was one of the lucky few candidates at that year to get through the interview process and then land an internship with Walt Disney Studios in Florida. When I got to Florida, I was there, went through a really rapid internship program, learning all the aspects of animation, including animation, layout, storyboard, background. Not a lot of background painting, but just the kind of the basics. And then from there, I was lucky to move right into production. So moved into production, worked on Mulan, Tarzan, Lilo and Stitch, and finally Brother Bear, with a few small projects for the Disney theme parks sprinkled in between, and freelance that no one's supposed to know about. But I'm telling you guys here. And then in the early 2000s, after learning traditional animation and 3D animation while at Disney, I transitioned from there to work for a small company in New Jersey called IDT Entertainment, where I was doing storyboard and 3D animation for a few of their various projects to get them up on off the ground. And that was during a time of transition, and where classical animation was slowly being replaced by the new shinier kid on the block, which was 3D animation, because Pixar was doing gangbusters with their films. They were doing a lot of major hits, and that was attracting a lot of attention. So while I was transitioning there, I saw a lot of things happening where it was time to make changes to what I do and learn as much as I could about how the industry was changing at that time. from that period of time, like I did make the leap out here to California to work in animation, but not specifically in the animation field, but in video game production. So utilizing the 2D storytelling skills as well as the 3D skills that I picked up along the way, I was able to move into cinematic production and become a lead cinematic artist, where I was putting together cinematics for video games for AAA titles, and worked on a number of AAA titles before, that period of time in game animation kind of led me to where I jumped from that to TV animation. And I learned the pipeline in TV animation, working on primetime action shows, comedy shows, and then eventually over time into feature animation, and then back into TV animation. And then I'm currently in feature animation, and that kind of leads us here to this time. I don't want to, that's kind of like a brief microcosm. I know I'm leaving out a ton of details, but I just want to make sure that we're not spending too much time on like backstory. And I just wanted to caveat, like a lot of the things that I'm going to present today, as I'm not a licensed doctor, physician, therapist, financial advisor, lawyer, or nutritionalist, just keep in mind that what I'm going to be talking about today is just things that I've learned over the years, or that I've used that have been helpful to me. And I'm just a fellow artist sharing those bits and tips with you all. So take what works for you on your creative journey. And if it's useful, fantastic. If not, keep learning, keep applying, keep trying different things, and drop what doesn't work. So.
Yeah, and I think you've been through a ton of transitions in your career, and through times of boom and bust, through times when there was less work and there was more work. And I think I think for me, that's kind of the thing that's overarching on all this, is we might be in a crazy time, but there are ways to survive it, and there are ways to thrive in it. And here are some strategies, and we will talk a little bit about the greater context of what's going on, but also how to make it work for you.
For sure. That being said, let's dive in, and hopefully we can get to some talking points. Okay, so this is basically just a little presentation that I put together for you guys, an animation career toolkit. It's a very brief primer, so we'll try and go through it. If there are any questions as you're going that you want me to clarify, please feel free to like throw a question in the chat, and we could stop and talk about it, or we could save all questions to the end, and then we'll go from there. So I've thrown out a few quotes here just to get us started. This is from Walter Elliott. Perseverance is not a long race. It is many short races, one after the other. And that's basically what we do in animation all the time. Success is not final, failure is not fatal, and it is the courage to continue that counts. And that'll come up a lot as you go through your career. And a bend of the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make that turn. And I've learned that a lot throughout my career. It's like when everything's going one way, you could either go that way, or you go your own way. And it's a matter of you finding the right path to make the right turns that you need to make to be successful in everything that you're trying as you continue to go on in your career. And for everything, there is a season. So getting into the boom and the bust. So we had in the 90s, or the mid 80s to the late 90s, we had a huge boom in like video game entertainment, comic entertainment, and of course there's other markets that started to boom, especially in the 1980s with the television series. They were really expanding, in terms of production. And then eventually that kind of petered out. And then we saw like it kind of died down, and then it came back again, where, in the late 90s, we started having the .com expansion, where everything was like internet, and it was like boom, boom, boom. Everything was like grow, grow, grow. All these companies were coming out of nowhere, just speculative companies, as well as the speculative comic market, especially in the late 90s, where everyone was buying tinfoil covers and, gold holographic covers. And people were like, it's $200 for like a copy of like Spider-Man #1. And it's like, it just came out. Why are we spending $200 on this? But again, we had this huge expansion in games as well, and all throughout the industry. And then of course it collapsed dot-coms collapsed, and then it started all over again. So now in the 2000s, again, I'm going to speed through this because I know no one wants a history lesson, but we had a really great growth period where in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had this kind of golden age of feature animation where DreamWorks started up. They made Prince of Egypt. Everyone started getting into the game. Warner Brothers, Disney was putting out hits, and a few other companies like Turner, they were all putting together films, and they're like, hey, this is a great opportunity to make some serious content and cash. Because that was, when Lion King came out in the mid 90s, it made $300 million, and people were just like, whoa, we could totally do this. So that's kind of when I jumped into animation, was like, not to date myself, but Mulan came out in 98. So we started in 96 to work on that film. And it was towards the tail end of the golden age of classical animation, but no one really knew that yet. And we just kind of saw that happen as Pixar started to rise, classical animation started to dip in terms of box office sales. And then, it started to pick back up again, in mid 2000s. So now it kind of brings us back up to where we are now. At 2020, we see, we've had a huge boon of streaming companies, aside from Disney, Netflix, and Hulu, and Apple Plus, and DreamWorks TV, and all these different companies have jumped into the market back in 2014, and they've continued to create content after content after content to try and capture the streaming market. We've seen an expansion of jobs, lots of growth, lots of different studios, lots of opportunity. And now we're going through this volatile time where studios are starting to shrink back a little bit and be like, whoa, we got to rethink how much money we've spent so far. So things are getting a little dicier. But if you look back at the history of all the things that have happened over the decades, like we see this pattern over and over, where there's going to be a huge growth spike, and then there's going to be like a gradual decline, and a huge growth spike and a gradual decline. It's just like watching a stock market. So it's not like you can't predict it. You can't quite predict what's going to be a hit, what's going to be not a hit. But if you see this pattern that happens over time, you're like, okay, this is kind of normal. Like I can get acclimated to that. I can figure out what can I do in the lean time. So if the boom time is happening, and there's production just going crazy, and they can't find enough people just to put on the production to make the thing, and that's a great time. You could ride that. And then when the things are a little tighter, where there's not as many plentiful jobs, like then you can decide, okay, what can I do at this point in time? Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. So what I'm trying to do really is to take away and demystify some of the anxiety and fear that can be happening as we see these kind of rise and falls throughout the industry. So can't be brave without fear. Muhammad Ali, great hero of mine. He's a guy who has gone through massive amounts of adversity. If you've ever read his life story, or watched the recent film that happened, if you want to skip the reading part, but he's gone through massive changes in his life, where there's high times and there's low times, high times and there's low times, and every time he's fought through against that fear. He has that fear to motivate him to push into the bravery and to overcome those particular obstacles. So also we got Darwin. Just want to throw this out there. It's not the strongest species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. And that's what we can take from, and just to remember in our memory banks, that like as we go through these highs and lows in the animation industry, as I've seen things change, and I've seen jobs disappear, and I've seen jobs reappear or appear out of nowhere, like I've had to realize as I've been on this journey that it's me. I have to change. Like I can rail against the industry. I could declare how unfair it is, that there's good times and then there's bad times, that there's lots of jobs and there's no lots of jobs. That's irrelevant. What I need to do as as I'm taking care of my studio or my business, which in this case is you incorporated, you have to do the best thing that you can do as a business owner to take care of your studio. So there's a lot of different things that you have to learn and take into account when you're running your studio. Your studio is the most important business, and there's a lot of things, a lot of hats you have to wear, because you not only have to be the primary CEO of your company, you also have to be the HR department, you have to be the finance and billing department, and you have to be the production department, amongst many other departments like sanitation, maintenance, and cleaning. Those are all things that you as a business owner, you have to think about when you're approaching all the situations that you encounter in your animation career or your video game career, because those are the things that will help you to like frame how you approach your challenges. If you think of yourself in that business leadership role, it's like, okay, like if I was running my own company, and I am my own company, if I'm seeing a shortfall in revenue, like how do I deal with those challenges? So where this leads me to where we can place our focus. Where is our locus of control? Again, are we focused on external circumstances like the industry is petering out, like there's not as many jobs, oh, the economy is in shambles, blah, 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 the war over in such and such place. All of those are factors outside of our control, right? We can't really do much about, oh, there was a gas plant fire in such and such state. Well, that's great, but I can't really do much about that. Unexpected turn of events, concepts of fairness, that's really a human concept, like, because life just is, there isn't really fair or unfair. Like usually if something happens, like I got a flat tire, I could say, yeah, that was unfair, but it just happened. So whether it's fair or not fair, it's just something I have to deal with. Limiting beliefs, that's, you know what those are. So I'm not, those are all up here. So I'm not going to go deeply into that. And all of these things, like when we're focused on all of these things, that pushes us, it drives us into this brick wall of fear, anxiety, and paralysis if we focus too much on these things, right? Because like if we're thinking about things that are out of our control, it takes our focus away from what we can do, and that generates fear and anxiety and, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like I just got laid off. Oh no, what happens? How do I find, what's the next thing? Well, where can we focus? Our internal locus of control, right? So those are things that we definitely can work on because they're right in us. They're personal to us. It's our discipline, our focus, our consistency, our persistence, our perseverance, our endurance, and our faith in our ability, our self or higher power, if you believe in such. These are all things that when you take the focus of where you're looking outward and you kind of put inward and say, okay, how can I practice these things every day towards my goal? It takes your focus from the uncontrollable things that create your fear, and it kind of zeroes you in a little bit. Not to be too introspective, but we're just talking about trying to control and manage the ups and the downs in industry, because there's going to be a lot, and it's going to happen over your career where things are going great and then things are not going so great, and that could even happen on a production, right? So you think about this, like, yeah, things could get crazy in the animation industry where there's lots of jobs, there's not lots of jobs, right? Or you could be on a production where things are going great. You just started and it's fantastic. You're having a great time. And then you get your first major deadline and you get a lot of notes on your board or whatever it is that you're working on. You're like, oh shit, and that internal barometer in you goes like from, hey, I'm great. Oh my God, this is horrible. Oh, this is great. I just got a great review. Oh my God, this is horrible. So these are the kind of things that, we could shift our focus to these aspects, which we can control, right? And then pushing all of that, pushing ourselves into those areas of focus and working through the tasks that we have at hand, we can hit a target of, success, like one successful pitch, one successful presentation, one successful episode, one successful job landing, one successful interview, and over and over and over, one job to the next, to the next, to the next, because it's multiple targets. You're going to hit your first target, and then that target will go away, and then you'll hit your next target afterwards. And you just repeat the process. Be brave, take risks. Nothing can substitute experience. I was just thinking about this today, and the fact that every experience that I've been through has prepared me for the next experience. Like Jim and I were just talking about video games, right? And I was thinking about it this week. Video games, we find it so easy when we're working on an RPG or we're working with characters and we're leveling them up. It's so easy because we're just like, oh, we're playing a character. It's like so outside of our being, right? And we collect different items, we collect different things that we equip our character with. You're gaining all that experience and XP and leveling that character up. Why is it so hard for us to think about that for ourselves, right? So even if you lose a battle or you win a battle, like, or you win a great review or get a bad review, or you have a great pitch or a bad pitch, or you don't get that job or you do get that job, all those little experiences that you have over your career and over your lifetime, I mean, those are all things that are preparing you for that next step, that next battle. So every experience, even if it's bad, is still a good experience because you can use that to learn from, figure things out, because that's the same thing you do when you're playing video games, right? When you go up against a higher level NPC or a boss, what usually happens? Sometimes you get your ass kicked, right? And then you go back and you figure out, well, did I equip this? Did I do that? Oh, I didn't get that magic sword. Oh, I should have gotten that magic sword because that was better for damage, right? Okay. Oh, and I need better shielding. I need better protection. Oh, and I got to make sure I got my, emergency supply ration so that mid-battle I can like refuel and restore my health, right? So you do all those things naturally when you're playing a video game. And that's the same kind of things that we could do when we're working in our career. If we go up for an interview and we don't get it, not necessarily because we did something wrong, but maybe there was something that we could do that we could learn from, like, oh, maybe I would be better prepared if I had done a little research on the company, or maybe a little research on the property if it's available, or maybe, whatever it might be, that you can look at that experience and then walk it back and then analyze, so that when you go back forward again to attack that interview, pitch, storyboard, what have you, you're more prepared this time, and your chances of success have just increased because you're approaching it methodically and strategically. So here's some really quick, simple practices that I was thinking about, that since we don't talk a lot about what happens when you're in the midst of what you're doing, especially if you're in a job search situation, one of the things that even if you're working on a storyboard too, like in the middle of a deadline, whether it's background or like a layout that you're doing, or many layouts or many character designs, the things that we don't usually talk about, especially in animation, we don't talk about like the physical and psychological things that you could do to help you get through your challenges. So I just want to touch on a few of those really briefly here. The first thing is, like, try as much as you can to keep calm. Level-headed planning when you're doing a job search cannot proceed well if you're emotionally freaked out. Now, you know what I'm saying? Because, like, let's say I've had this happen many times in my career. Like, I get the news, thanks very much, you've done a fantastic job, we love everything you do, we love you, we think you're a great person, we're going in another direction. Or, we don't have any more work, we've reached the end of the road, your end date is such and such and such. That can hit you like a ton of bricks if you're not ready for it. But if you stay calm, you're like, okay, what can I do at this point? Even if you're like working on a storyboard, this still works, or many character designs. Throughout your day, if you can, every 35 minutes or whatever. You don't have to do this in an exit interview, but just think about it. Take a break. Stand up from your desk, face away from your desk, because you don't want to keep staring at the thing that's making you anxious, right? Stand away from your desk and take 5 to 10 deep breaths from your diaphragm, not from your chest, but from your diaphragm. Just because I just did that from my chest, right? I didn't feel I could feel my stomach was like super tight, right? But if you just let your stomach relax, hold it, so you want to take 4 seconds out or 4 seconds in, hold it for 4 seconds, then let it out for 4 seconds and hold it, and then breathe it back in again. This is called box breathing, and the Navy SEALs have trained all of their SEALs to do this. And I tell you, you try this exercise if you're feeling a little stressed. It's something you have to practice. It won't work when you first try it, but you have to repeatedly practice in order to get really good at it. But SEALs are fantastic at it, and that helps them stay calm in a firefight, in a stressful situation. And these are the things that you could use, that people do use in high stress situations, that help you in your job search, as well as your daily duties when working in animation, riding the high, riding low, even in your job. Okay, assess the situation based on fact. What do we know? Like, I'm thinking, like, in terms of job loss, like, what do you have at your disposal, materially, physically, financially? What resources are at your disposal? What do you have right now that you can utilize for your job search if you've been laid off, right? What can you reconnoiter that's within your control, and who is not under your control, but who's available to you? Like, who's available to you that right now you could talk with about what's what's your next steps, or what's your game plan? Who can you reach out to think about, like, oh, okay, who can I talk to that might be able to help me find someone who needs assistance or my type of assistance, right? And plan your response, ask questions. What can I do now that makes the most financial sense to my business? And this is something just to kind of bring you back to reality, so that we're not thinking about the future like, oh my God, I don't know how to pay my rent. If I lost my job, if I got laid off, what can you do right now that you've been laid off, or you're searching for a job? What can you do right now that will help you reach that goal, whatever that goal might be? What makes the most financial sense for your studio, your business, you incorporated? So I'll give you an example. I got the news. I've been laid off. I'm freaking out. Oh my God. Like, I don't know what to do now. And now ask yourself a question. What does freaking out do right now to help me in the next step to find another job, right? If the answer is not much, then you're probably right. If the answer is like, well, it helps me feel better, okay, freak out for a couple minutes, but then you have to step back and ask yourself, what can you do right now that makes the most sense for me to take the next step to find another opportunity, or to find a new opportunity? Let's say you're working in a job and you want to find something new. It's like, it's always coming back to, what can I do right now? Like, what can I do now that's going to help me line something else up? Okay. And then it's really simple. It's like you start to execute the plan you've developed based on the feedback that you've assessed of, like, what do I have available? Who do I have that I could talk to? And what can I do? And you just start executing. Just start calling those people. Just start making the little steps every day to get you to achieve those goals. Whether it's like writing a checklist, like, okay, call this person, call that person, email this recruiter, check my financial bank account, or talk to my financial advisor, talk to my real estate agent, or my broker, whatever it might be. Write out that list, and then just start going on the list and checking it off. And those things that you do on a daily basis, those are going to put you in the driver's seat. It's going to make you feel like, okay, I've got this. I know what I'm doing. It may feel stressful. It may feel kind of crazy, like, oh my God, like there's so many things coming at me all at once. But if you put that list together, you stand a better chance of like fending that off. Okay, I know I have to pay the bill on the 15th. All right, I'll write that on the list. All right. Oh, I got the car payment due, or I got the insurance company that's asking me for the such and such. Okay, write it on the list. And that's, as a director, when I was directing, every day I would have a list of what I had to do that day. So if it was like check sequence roughs for A, B, and C, go over the animatic with director's notes, or EP notes, go over such and such, design. I would look at all the things. I would write it out the night before I left for the day. I would write out all the things I had to do for the day on the following day. And then I would come in and I'd look at that list, and I would organize, like, how usually the night before I'd organize my morning, my afternoon, and my day. And I'd be like, these are all the things that I want to hit today. And if I get it all in, fantastic. If I don't, I'll just take whatever I didn't, put it on the next day, and try and make sure that I hit all those things by the end of the week, so that I'm consistently making progress. And you take that chaos of like production or job search, and you organize it, put it into an organized list. So you can just bullet point and go like, oh, I did this and I did this. And that's the same thing you do when you're playing video games, right? You're going to go up against that boss. So you got to get, I got to get the magic sword. I got to get the shield from over there and do that quest, that side quest to get the magic shield. And I got to make sure I got fully stocked, quiver. And I got to make sure that I got a fully stocked food ration. Okay, I got to do all these different things. Check. Now let's go take on the boss, right? So that's the kind of same thing that you do during your day. And then what do? You reassess, you repeat, you assess based on fact, go through the whole process, take some deep breaths while you're doing it so you don't pass out from all the activity, and you repeat. Because this is what we do to improvise, adapt, and overcome. This is kind of a meme that I had on one show with my board artists. We were talking about this because we had to do this on a daily basis. It was always, the production was kind of built on a framework that was like, it looked good on paper, but then we had a lot of shifting sand underneath, so that, a lot of changes were coming in from left and right on a daily basis, and we had to adjust and pivot. all the time. And that's similar to how it was working in video games. There'd be a lot of demands that would come in at the last minute, and you'd have to pivot immediately. Like you put in a week's worth of work, and then suddenly someone's like, hey, I got this great idea. And it's like, whoa, that's going to blow up everything I just did. And now it's time to pivot. I got to reassess everything that I just did to fit that new paradigm, squeeze it into the work, redo it in record time, and get it back to you in like a short time window. And those things will come out of nowhere. And you have to be able to adapt to those changes and improvise, figure out like, okay, what's the best, fastest way to overcome this particular problem and still go home at a relatively decent time so I don't see the sun come up, that kind of a thing. Those are things that, like, through practice over time, you get better at doing. It's just, you know, especially when we go through the ups and downs, you get more adept at doing it. Ups and downs in production, ups and downs in industry. Okay, so here's some sample practices for consistent work that I found that have been pretty helpful. And I'm sure you probably have heard this before from perhaps other talks or that you've listened to. So again, if this is repetitive, I'm sorry for that. It's just, I'll try and phrase it in a funny voice or something to make it a little bit more interesting. Be respectful. And remember, you are your business's ambassador. Humility and humanity count. I know we're all human. So be the best human that you could possibly be. And just remember, you're representing your business, and, you know, things happen. So, you know, just be graceful wherever you are, whatever company you're working for, and whatever does happen, you know, if you can, be respectful. Even if people are asking you to do crazy things that you would not want to do, or you consider, you know, unfair, again, it's like, try the best you can to be humble and humility, you know, have some humility and just do what needs to get done and, you know, move on. Now, again, I'm not saying do anything illegal, illicit, or immoral. I'm just saying, like, do your best to be the best human that you could be so that your business is well represented, so that when you leave there, people go, damn, that guy or that gal or that person, damn, I want to work with them again. Damn, I'm too bad this project ended too soon. I got to get them back here. You know, that kind of thing. That's the thing that you want. You want people talking so well of you, even as you walk out the door, that they're just like, damn it. All right, I'm putting him on my lexicon, or her, or, you know, them. All right, honor your commitments, meet your deadlines. I mean, this is pretty straightforward stuff. You've probably heard this a bazillion times. Hold yourself accountable to your word. I mean, that's your bond is your word, basically. When you mess up, take responsibility. We all know that it's hard to do, but trust me, it's worth it. Forgive yourself and do better next time. That's one thing that us as artists and creatives, we have a hard time doing, right? We have a hard time forgiving ourselves for making small mistakes and huge mistakes. And trust me, I know I've been there and I've done all of them. Well, maybe not all of them, but you get the idea. So the thing is, just be easy on yourself, because we are human. We do make mistakes. We can't be perfect. So again, I'm not perfect. I've had my share of screw ups, and yeah, it's challenging, but just do your best to take responsibility and forgive yourself and move on. Keep in contact with family, friends, your colleagues, and proactively seek new contacts. I mean, this is something that we have seen proliferate since the introduction of social media. They talk about, oh, your social media connections are fantastic because now you can have like 300 friends on a platform. But you know what really is great? Keeping in contact, especially physical contact, or calling someone on the phone, and just being a human to them. You know, text messages are one thing and emails are one thing, but there's nothing more appreciated than having a coffee time or a chat with someone. If you're lucky to work right now in a studio, being able to meet with someone in person and just kind of pull them aside, say, hey, well, you know, let's go get a cup of coffee and just spend time. Maybe not even talking about work, maybe talking about something else, like what they're all about. You know, maybe what they did over the weekend. And again, I'm not trying to be facetious or you know, coy or calculative. I'm just saying, like, you know, we work in a human business, right? And you, as an ambassador of your business, your studio, you have a responsibility to meet people and to introduce them to who you are. And we're all human, and that's what we do best. When we congregate together, we make things happen. We grow things together. And that positive energy that we have when we meet together and we're genuinely enthusiastic about spending time with one another, that just makes magic happen, right? Like, how many times have you been in a studio environment where you meet people and you get into a conversation and then just the magical conversation starts to take off, and then before you know it, people are just throwing out ideas and they're just having a great time having a conversation, and we don't even know how it got started, right? But there was an energy there that we couldn't have if we were just sending texts, if we were just sending an email. So that's the kind of thing that is really exciting about working in animation, because I don't think I've worked in any other business that has had the ability for people to get together in a studio space, be creative, and then have that excitement of the magic of creativity happen between everyone. And then everyone walks away with a little bit of something. Everyone walks away with a little bit of inspiration, and then they go back to their desks and they just put it down and make things happen in their own storyboard. And then it's like, those are the good times. Okay, right? So in the highs of your day, the highs of the business, those are fantastic times when you have all that creative juice going. And then when it peters off, what's going to get you through those valleys? Remembering how good that was when you had that situation, right? That's when you're going to be like, oh yeah, just got to get to that next little peak, right? Like, I'll get through this little valley, but I'll get to that next peak. And when that happens, bam, you're just like, can't wait to do that again. That's what keeps us going. Okay. Let's see. And, oh, how did I get back there? All right. So this is a little big of a big topic. I'm just going to talk about it really briefly. Psychological endurance is necessary as we're going through those peaks and valleys, right? So if you can, again, this is not medical advice or psychological advice, but we are a creative bunch, right? So we have to take care of our mental faculties as well as our creative faculties. A lot of times when you watch portfolio reviews or you see tutorials online, it's all about the creative art execution and how to make your art better, right? But I don't see a lot of tutorials on how to make your psychological, stamina better, because this is a creative task that we're putting all of our psyche into, right? So when we spend time pouring ourselves into our designs, our boards, our backgrounds, and our animation, there's not a whole lot of discussion about like, well, how do you keep that going, right? Because it's tough, it's draining. You put all that energy in, that's a lot of energy coming from your body. How do you put that back in so you can keep doing it, repeating it over and over? So on your job search, on your networking, in your art creation, take time if you can to focus on activities outside of that, right? So I'm talking about taking some time every morning, do a little meditation, do a little whether it's meditation or prayer, whatever you got to do, maybe some reading, some personal development time, some personal writing time, some physical exercise time. Get out, away from your computer, put your phone down or put it in a bag if you're going to take it with you so you can be reached in case of emergency. Just put it in your bag and don't look at it, right? So first, I remember hearing this advice and I've stuck to it. Like in the first 30 minutes to an hour when you wake up, don't look at your phone. Just put it away and just get out and just enjoy your time doing something completely different. Because that mental vacation that your brain is allowed to take when you get out away from your art creation or your networking, your job searching, is going to help recharge your internal batteries and help you get ready for the day. So like if it's physical activity is fantastic, it could be yoga, could be biking, could be hiking, could be running, could be, working out with weights, martial arts, whatever you want to do. But and a lot of it is free, so like if you go biking, riding, hiking, walking, going outside, that's all free. So you don't have to pay a gym membership. You just go out and do it, for like 30 minutes. If you could squeeze that in the morning, and you come back and you're just like, okay, I just took control of my morning, right? I spent some time getting grounded. I put my feet in the grass in the sunshine in the morning. I'm like, okay, I'm in touch with nature. All right. And now I go back to do my day because I did the hardest part of the day first. If it was working out physically, then you're good to go. Now you're pumped full of endorphins and you're ready to be like, all right, let's find some contacts to make, right? Let's do some emails, which are God, monotonous and boring, but hey, come on, let's do it, because we got that energy, we did something else, and now we're coming back. All right. So this also ties into that, practicing gratitude and grace under pressure. this is a little quote that I want to throw out there. Know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope, and hope does not disappoint. What's great is that all, like I said earlier, all the experiences that you experience, whether it's suffering or good times, like those all work towards the good of your outcome for your development over time. Empower yourself whenever you can. Listen to inspiring music, motivational messages, reinforcing positive practices, and self-hypnosis. And it's all temporary. So all of the challenges that you've encountered so far, I mean, you have unlimited potential, like we all do. And it's so hard to hear that nowadays. Like nobody's ever talking about it, right? So when you listen to tutorials, it's always about like, practice your craft, hours and hours and hours and hours of practicing your craft, which is true, yes. But if you know that you have unlimited capacity within you, it makes it so much easier that you want to dig into it more and tap into that a little bit more. Knowing that it's like, oh yeah, I could get to that. I have it in me. You know, if I know other people know that and I see it all around me and I'm inspired by watching what they do, then I could probably do that too. Anyway, I love this quote from Denzel. Love Denzel because he's a guy who's been through a ton. And I was listening to this commencement speech and I was like, yeah, this is so great. Like, have you ever tried a storyboard that, you've never done, say, an acting scene before? Or how about an action scene or a car chase? Have you ever done those before? Like, no, probably not very often, all the time, unless that's, that's your bread and butter. But the thing is, like, through time and through effort and through practice, we know that we're not going to be good where we are when we start, but over time and practice, we will get better. I always talk to my daughter about the fact that, if she's drawing something and she says, man, I suck at this. It's like, and I ask her, so how much time have you spent practicing drawing that? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, I'll tell you, probably about a year. So do you really expect to be fantastic? Like the guys that you see on, or the gals that you see online? No, it's going to take time, practice, and just admit to yourself, yeah, it's going to take time. And that same thing goes for like how this animation industry works. Like there's going to be great times and we're going to feel great and everything's going great. And then there's going to be lean times and we're going to like, what the hell's wrong? It's just part of embracing the change. We can be terrible at something, but also the circumstances can be challenging, and we just have to embrace that because it's going to be inevitable. We have to get through it. Okay. Any questions so far before we move on? Because I know I've been going for feels like 50 minutes.
I've been collecting questions in the chat too, so we can, I think, a couple of them we can get to afterwards because we have some specific questions. But
okay,
and we'll see if more come up in the chat. But it seems like so much of what you're talking about, I don't know, the title for this is "What the heck is happening in animation," and it seems like that the overarching message is it doesn't, like, there's a lot of craziness going on, but this isn't permanent, and
right.
this is just a local view of what's going on right now. And in the long term, it doesn't matter as much because you can only control what you do. You can only control what your experience of it is, and that the rest of the outside conditions when it comes to the greater stuff that you can't control it's like the weather. You can't control the weather, but you can still go for a run every morning.
Right, exactly. And the reason all of this that I brought up previously is important is because when we saw the writing on the wall in the early 2000s, when feature animation was kind of petering out when it came to classical animation, everyone was like in a stressed state. Everyone knew that things were coming to a close, right? So that the good times, the fat times, were going to be leading into lean times, right? And it's similar to what's happening now. We're heading into a time where things are going to get a little bit leaner. Things are going to get a little bit tighter. So with that restructuring that's happening with all of the different streamers, the questions that will arise is like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, oh my God, there's no jobs. Like, no, don't go down that path. Once you start going down that path of focusing on like the lean times and the lack of work, you're taking the focus away from what you can do right now, right? So when I saw the lean times are coming, it's very similar to like when I was told back at SfA, in my freshman year before I started, they said, by the time you graduate, 85% of you will not be working in the creative field. How many of you heard that? Right.
I heard that at SfA too. I
Yeah.
think we probably had the same professors.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, well, thanks for that, but you have to then decide, am I going to listen to this statistic that has absolutely nothing to do with me, or am I going to do whatever is within my power to make sure that I'm working toward the goal of being creative or working in a creative field? And I know a lot of people, if they, that I graduated with, a lot of people just said, I give up. They focused on the statistic and the hard job market, the lack of jobs. And the folks that I knew who were like, to hell with that, they focused on what they could do. And they were out there hustling every day, like doing the steps that I outlined of like, finding out what the resources were that were available to them, what they needed to do every day. And they landed work and they kept working. I mean, yeah, it was a little intermittent at times, but they kept building towards that success. So like success after success. And that the reason why I'm focused so much on mindset right now, not so much on like the industry retraction or shrinkage, is because focusing on that doesn't help us move forward as creatives, right? So like when a studio lays an entire crew and gives them a day's notice and says, thanks very much guys for all your work. You're done at 6 o'clock today, goodbye. If I focus on the unfairness of that layoff situation that I've lived through, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to move forward. But if I know, because I've done this before, again and again and again, I know, okay, business owner of mine clicks in and it's like, okay, what can I do now? I just got that news. That's an outward situation. I can't control that. But what can I do right now? Okay, I need to do this, this, and this. And I just go down the list. Now, who's in control? Is the outward situation in control, or am I in control? And again, like, I'm not saying you have to be like a calculative robot with no feelings, because I mean, I'm a human being too. And, I get upset when things like that happen. But these are just tools that you can employ to allow yourself to stay in control and to have a better outcome versus like go into a spiral where you're like, oh my God, the industry is collapsing. I don't know what to do. I just, kind of sit here and look at Twitter for the rest of the, oh my God, it's horrible, it's horrible. So, that's not going to lead you to a beneficial outcome, especially for those people that are hungry, who want to break into the industry. And they're hearing, I remember hearing stories about this, like for those people that are trying to break into the industry, if they're hearing industry veterans decry the sky is falling, that can hinder them from moving forward and taking what they want or getting into what they want. So the best thing that we can do is like accept the fact, as Denzel talks about, accept the fact that things are going to suck sometimes. Just accept it. Like, yeah, this is going to be a sucky time. All right. Well, what can I do to make this better for me and my family or my career? That kind of thing. And just outline the steps and just methodically go through it. And then you're like, okay, I got this. All right. We've been through this before. And trust me, if you've been laid off enough times, you're just going to like, all right, I know what to do. Like, what's next? And, I had a one colleague who had left feature animation named James Paris, who went out here to LA. He left Florida like early on after Mulan finished, and he started working in the visual effects business, and he was doing animation, and he was invited to come back and give us a talk before our studio shut down, because there was a lot of volatility. There was a lot of studios out here, especially in LA, feature studios that were shutting down. They were laying off hundreds of people at a time. And everyone was freaking out because it was like, oh my God, it's the end of animation, no more. And this was like 2002, I think it was 2003. We saw the writing on the wall starting in 2001. And then 2002, like most of the LA staff and feature animation in Disney was laid off. And then 2003, it was our turn, so we knew it was coming, but he came back and he gave us a talk, and he just was like adding value to us by talking to us about these similar concepts, like what can you do, how can you financially prepare, are you prepared for the eventuality and the inevitability that things are going to be a little tight, or things are going to be a little suck at times, and preparing for those things. So I'm trying to focus on that versus like, oh, this studio streamer is like killing shows. It's like, well, we can't do anything about that right now, but what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do now? It's time to assess accounts. What kind of accounts? Physical, psychological, financial, and artistic. And the way I was thinking about this was, recently doing a lot of work. When we think about things, if you think about things kind of like as a checkbook balance, like, whatever adds to your account is a benefit to you, and whatever takes away from your account is a debit to you. So same goes for the hours and hours you spend at the desk. Like when we're eating whole foods, it's a plus, helps our health. And when we take out, we do processed foods or food-like products, it kind of works against us, doesn't make us feel very good. It also affects our endurance. How long can we sit at a desk, to do the work that we need to do to perform our best? Strength training and resistance would be great. Just do some physical activity versus just 8 hours or more sitting at a desk. Oxygen, doing some cardio, which is so much more beneficial than, again, when you're in a crunch and you're hunched over your desk and you're just trying to get stuff done, your breathing gets very shallow, and it's really hard to concentrate and perform optimally because you're not breathing very well. You're breathing up from the chest, not from the diaphragm. The reason why I mention it is because I've been guilty of this for years, and I'm trying to make progress to change it. Getting outside, getting some vitamin sunshine versus being indoors all the time. Get some good night's sleep if you can. I know we work late or we want to cram on projects, but it's kind of detrimental to our overall performance. Stretch breaks versus bare minimum movement. And then psychological, I'm going to go through this because we covered a lot of it before. Morning meditation, gratitude, acceptance, challenging those thoughts. If you have something that comes up that you're like, oh my God, the industry doesn't have any jobs. Really? Who said that? Who said that? Where did that come from? Is that true? Is it factual? Can we verify that? Can we look at the stats? Probably not. So if it's not, then it's the same as like when that thought runs through your head, because I know I've had it, and I'm sure you've had it, where that thought runs through your head and you're drawing something, you're like, I suck. And it's like, or I suck at this, or this drawing sucks. Like, really? Who said that? Like, how can we verify that? And then you just ask yourself, is this question helpful right now? If it's not helpful for me, it's not adding to my benefit of like getting through this problem, then why do I think of this? All right, this is garbage. I'm getting rid of it. Visualization, thinking about where you want to go, what you want to do, having faith in yourself, and then adapting to situations. Oh, sorry, skip. Assistance and engagement. Just getting into assistance, basically being asked for help, basically. And engaging with like whatever it is you're doing. I'm gonna skip some of the other things. I'm just gonna kind of skip to the end, just so we get set. I think because we're coming up on the hour. But these are the kind of things that I was thinking about, oops, there we go. Thinking about your finances, right? So allocating your essential necessary income to your necessities and trying to pare down right now, especially as the industry is starting to contract, thinking about all the unnecessary costs that you have and seeing if you can pare those down. So paring down your internet, your phone, whatever extra expenses that you have that you can eliminate, like unassessed luxury expenses, like that trip to get coffee every week or every single day or twice a day. Trying to get rid of those habits to allocate your income where it really needs to go. So that way you have what you need, which is building a financial safety net. So like a 6-month, think about, this is one of the bits of advice that I remember getting, building a 6-month safety raft financially, so that if you are laid off, from a job, or you're going between jobs, you have 6 months of finances to cover your basics, your rent, your utilities, your groceries, whatever essentials that you might have. And that is very essentially important right now, especially due to the fact that we've got 8.5% inflation, which is kind of double that anyway. But those are really important right now, especially. So if you can, if you do freelance, put that money towards those. Study as much as you can, where you can, and if you need to, consult with a financial advisor. Like if you really need to, like, to go through your finances and figure out what you need to do to make it through a tight spot in your career.
And by the way, for anybody in the room, I think we are, because it keeps coming up, I think we are going to do a talk specifically about the financials of being an artist in the animation industry, because I think it's a topic that I need to learn more about, and it will be extremely helpful to just about everybody.
Of course, yeah, that's something that, like with any matter of study, like especially if you're running your own business, you have to think about like your financial overhead, what's coming in, how much you're going to allocate to research and development, how much you're going to allocate to your necessities just to cover your overhead, and what you're going to put in your emergency war chest. So that when you do run into those lean times, like I said, if you have a 6-month war chest, you might be good to take care of your benefits. And also psychologically, if you know you have a 6-month war chest of like, financial supply ready to go, it takes some of the pressure off. Like, oh my God, I just got laid off, or oh my God, like there's not much going on out there. Like, how can I survive? It's like, well, okay, I'm all right. What I have right now is I've got some financial backup. And then I just want to jump quickly to some other things. Like, what other tools are in your toolbox? So this has come in handy for me over the course of the career, because the more skill sets that you have that you can apply, the more variety of jobs you can work on, as well as like the more variable your skills are. So you will allow yourself to like, oh, okay, I don't only have to be in 2D animation. I can move into 3D animation. Oh, but now I do some production management, or I've done some animatic editorial stuff. So maybe there's an opportunity there. So it may not be the dream ideal opportunity that you want, but you have an opportunity to stay employed and stay sane while you're looking for that next opportunity in storyboard or in character design or in visual development. So like, what other things can you do? And it's always good to start practicing where you can to develop those other skills. And that also means like personal skills, like interpersonal skills, like developing those skills, like how well do you communicate with people, so that if you are intended or you have an intention to move up, let's say you're a revisionist and you want to move up to storyboard, like how do you communicate well? Like how well is your communication? How do you communicate with your supervisors so that they know, oh, okay, this person can really clearly communicate and understands how the production process works, so that they can take on more responsibility. Or if you're saying middle management, you want to move up higher or lower, whatever. But all those skills are going to come into play, especially when you're interviewing or talking to recruitment, or even talking to maybe HR departments at smaller studios where they don't have a recruiter, but you're just talking to someone directly. You have an opportunity to share with them, like, oh, you have a conversation, you get to know what they're looking for, and they don't have an opening for 2D animation, but they are looking really for 3D layout or 2D layout. And you're like, oh, I've done some backgrounds before. And then you could present that, and then maybe you could get your foot in the door trying another avenue. And that rounds you out as an artist and creative to try many different things, so that you consistently, like I said before, like you're using your skills and what you focus on to land those consistent jobs and stay employed. Basically, that's the name of the game. We want to make sure that your company is as successful as possible, and you continue to pull in the revenue. And then I just want to throw this out here. This is some suggested reading that is helpful. That, again, there's so many books out there. I can't put them all on screen because there's so many, and I've read a lot of different books. But these are books that I've read over the years that I've come back to, and it's like, oh, okay, this helps on the psychological level, spiritual level, as well as the business and financial level. So they're an opportunity just to dive in with the War of Art was a great read on how to like beat the creative process, how to get over the writer's block or creative block that we might have as we continue on this journey of creativity where we're constantly asked to make things over and over and over. Les Brown is great to listen to. If you really want to get fired up, there's a lot of motivational speakers out there, but I mean, Les presents things in a really unique way where, he talks about how he started from nothing. And now, I mean, the guy is worth like millions of dollars and he started from like nothing. I mean, seriously, nothing. So it's great to listen to him. So if it's possible for him, it's possible for any one of us to be successful long term. And I love Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. It's so simple. It's so great. If you read the book and you read or listen to any of her talks and you try what she's actually talking about, you're like, oh man, this is great. I didn't realize I could do this. So you just start doing it. And then the other two books are great reads, Mastery and The Warrior Within. But again, there's tons of books out there. I'd love to hear your suggestions for what's helped you over the years, because there are like tons and tons of books, and it's up to you to read through it all to figure out which ones work best for you. Closing thoughts. I can't close without talking about Denzel, because I love this quote that he had at the end of his speech. In the acting business, you fail all the time. Early in my career, I'm going to skip to the end but there's one thing: I didn't quit. I didn't fall back. I walked out of there to prepare for the next audition and the next audition and the next one. And I prayed and I prayed, but I continued to fail and I failed and I failed. But it didn't matter, because you know what? You hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later, you will get a haircut. You will catch a break. And that's, I love that about like what he's done. You look at his track record and you're like, oh my God. You don't ever see the failures, you only see the wins. And that's kind of like with animation. There's going to be a lot of heartache, where you go up and down and up and down. But, just know that you can get through it. It's going to happen. As long as we keep our focus. We know ourselves. And you don't have to fear anything. Anyway.
Amazing.
I am going to open it up to Q&A because I feel like I've been rattling on and without any feedback to stop me.
Amazing. No, amazing. The feedback was I was quiet because I was just listening and soaking it in and like just nodding the whole time. And I'm reinvigorated too.
Thank you for your patience, Jim. Thank you for your patience and listening through all of that, because it's sometimes it's great to like have conversations, and I would love to be able to like meet one-on-one with everybody here. It would be awesome to have like this big room discussion where we could throw information out and then like have that call, like that interaction between one another. So it's not just all me like spitting at y'all.
Yeah, I think we're figuring out ways to structure these that they could be a little bit more of a conversation too. So look for some of that in the future, y'all.
Awesome.
I'll get to a couple of questions, and I'm going to do a little bit of rephrasing.
Sure.
So
stop the share.
Oh, cool. So in this particular environment, there have been like, there have been discussions about interactions between the studio and certain productions, and certain productions have been have fallen on hard times, or been stopped, or been canceled.
Yep.
And I think the overall question that I want to challenge the premise of a little bit, but the overall question was what do we feel like can be done to improve relations between the creatives and the business side, between the people that are giving the money and the people that are making the art?
That's a good question. It really all depends on the people involved. Like in terms of like when you have creative executive teams that are at a studio that are responsible for making product, if they understand the pipeline and they understand like what goes into making a great product, it helps them to communicate with the creators to allow for that dialogue to happen, and they can come to a mutually agreeable compromise where they can meet the marketing goals of generating revenue for the studio to get the biggest ROI on their investment, but also meet the creative goal of creating unique content. How can that be facilitated? It's kind of comes down to like who's running the show. in terms of on both sides, right? Because it takes two teams to come together to make something unique. When you look at the track record of, say, a studio like Marvel, like their live action division, right? They seem to be able to have creative leadership meet artistic leadership, and they keep generating major blockbuster movie after blockbuster movie. And you might wonder, like, well, how are they doing it when other studios try it? It doesn't quite work. Again, it kind of comes down to who are the players involved? Like, how do they understand the process? How do they understand the unique ins and outs of creating compelling story? Are they approaching it from that aspect? Are they approaching it more of a marketing thing where they, again, I'm not saying that anyone's doing this, but I'm just throwing out hypotheses where, if someone's approaching it from a shareholder standpoint, where how can we maximize the return for our shareholders, that may not quite jive with, like, hey, we're trying to make a fantastic new film based on whatever property that the audience hasn't seen before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I feel like art and commerce aren't necessarily at strict odds with each other consistently. And I think, like, some of my favorite shows are huge consumer products shows,
Right.
but still have amazing storylines and amazing characters. And it feels like that the way to, for me, the way to improve relations between creatives and the business side is just come together and understand each other and understand where the middle ground is between the goals of the company and the goals of the creative. And I personally find that a really fascinating problem to solve of, okay, what's your motivation? You as a company would like to make a whole bunch of money. And I, as a person, as a creative, would love to make people laugh. And where's that intersection?
Right.
And how do we build something together that we both are, like, super excited about?
Yeah, and that's one of the creative challenges, I think, for any show and any production, is like to meet with the executives and have aligned goals where they want to make something that's unique and fun for the audience, but also does well financially. And when those two things align, and those two teams of people align, and they have that common shared goal, it makes it a lot easier. I think again, it's challenging when people feel pressured to have to perform to make a lot of money to offset debt that's been incurred by previous decisions. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now in the industry. It's like we're seeing that a lot of money has been spent by streaming companies to get up and running, to create new content. And now there's incredible pressure on the executive teams to, like, hey, we need to make back all that money that we spent to get us up and running and make all these shows. And it's a challenge for them, and especially when new creators are coming in and they're saying, like, hey, we want to make our unique vision, and then it has to be weighed against, like, what are the financial needs of the company, and that's where art and commerce have to kind of work things out to figure out what's the best route to do both. Because, again, time and money and resources are not unlimited. We have only so much time and so much money to make these things, so they have to make sure that they're best utilized.
And having that conversation and finding that middle ground also puts the impetus back on you, or it's the what can I do for this process? Like, I can't control necessarily the goals of the company,
Right.
but I can control how I react to those goals and how I interact and work with the people that are literally giving me, if you're a show creator, literally giving me millions of dollars in order to make a thing for them.
Right. And you, as a business owner, like, you have to decide, like, when I'm making my product with their financing, how can I ensure that the product that I'm making is going to bring me that return? Am I putting in the right amount of things that the market can accept as, like, whether it's super humorous, super exciting, whatever? What are the things that I need to look at in the marketplace that I want to include in my property so that I can then have the greatest chance of financial, well, and most importantly, critical return, from the fan base, that they look at all what that has been created, and they say, wow, this really speaks to me on a personal level, but it's got all of these other elements that I enjoyed from things I've seen previously, and they really gravitate to it, and then you start to see a hit build.
Mhm. And I personally I worked on Trolls, which
Uh,
was like an extremely heavy consumer product franchise. Um, but like seeing my niece wearing a Princess Poppy dress because she connected with Princess Poppy was such an amazing thing for me. And like that was a huge return on emotional investment in that show. And maybe Trolls isn't something that I like would have personally created or like came from the depths of my soul, but it was amazing to connect with those characters and it was amazing
mhm,
to work on that. And it just so happened to be like to hit the middle ground between art and commerce
mhm.
and actually really speak to people as well.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, a lot of people, when they start in art, it's the commercial aspect that kind of gets poo-pooed most of the time,
Mhm.
but it's art and commerce. So it's because it's what do they call that? Commercial art. I mean, that's what I
Mhm.
was introduced into. So it's commercial. I mean, we're making art to make money, to survive, but we're also making art to make money for companies, and ultimately, like, for the successes that I saw in other industries, they're making art to propel an idea forward. And if that idea generates revenue that they can then use to invest in research and development for new ideas, then they can start a cycle going. So, like, what happens when studios successfully make a film? They take the money that they've earned from that money, or sorry, from that film, and they reinvest it into the next film to generate even more content. So, like, us as artists, like that, it's not a strange thing, right? Because we want to make a product that sells well, that fans connect with, that makes people go, wow, I want more of this. Oh, okay. And now I have the finances, because you've purchased the item, to now make more of the thing that you like.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a perfect marriage of art and commerce.
I forget. I think it's a David Lynch line where he says, "You know, I don't necessarily care what the critics think. I'm just want to get enough money to make the next thing."
Right.
It's like as long as people keep giving us money to make things, that's a success. And that
Yeah.
the real success is continuing the process and continuing to be able to make things and continue to be able to be creative.
Yeah, and having the mindset to get through the process of, like, saying, no, I'm collecting revenue so I can continue making my art, or the art, whatever the art might be. And it's not evil. It's just that it's just part of the process of, like, how do we get our ideas out there? How do we put art into the world that inspires people? How do we put art out there that makes people want to make more art? And
Mhm.
it's through this process of, like, as you described it.
Heck yeah. So another question. And this is a very specific one, and I think I have a specific answer on this, but I'm very curious about yours. Um, the question was in traditional animation pipelines, it seems like animators and musicians and Foley artists and video editors like aren't as involved in the creation of the story. Um, are there places where that's not necessarily true? Are there places where it is more of a collaborative thing?
Well, you have a classical division of labor. Most studios have a classical division of labor. Like, you have the storyboard artists, then you have the animators. In television pipeline, it's like the storyboard artists are in the pre-production process, and then if the show is shipped to another country, then the animators just do what the board artists say, and then they're not really involved in the process, creatively speaking. They are in the fact that they animate and do great work, but they're not involved in the storytelling aspect. In feature animation, there's a possibility that you've got the editors, the storyboard artists, the animators, the directors, and layout teams. They're all involved in selling the story as and building the story and plussing the story as they work on it. So they are involved, like, with the cutting and the animating, and So it's just hard to see that from the outside, because sometimes one part of the one team in the process get kind of a lot more credit than everyone else, but everyone usually is contributing to aspects of the story, because great ideas will come out of anywhere. So like if a workbook artist in traditional pipeline has like, oh, would it be great if we did this with the story? If the directors consider that, it could take the story in another direction that might then affect the story artists, later, to change a sequence to make something pay off better in the third act or first act, or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of collaboration, involved, and it all depends on the production, like how far along the production is. I remember when I was on Mulan, after every screening, they would ask the entire studio, like, send us your notes. What did you think? And then even, people who are in effects, 3D effects, or 3D animation, or people who are running operations, they could write in their notes and be like, hey, I didn't like the part when this thing happened. And then, maybe you could try this. And there you go.
Yeah. I in the animatics, or like I do a lot of like working in animatic and restructuring episodes, and figuring out, like, when we see the first animatic of an episode, sometimes jokes don't work, or the story doesn't work, or we need a line in a specific place. And there have been situations where the animatic editor will just be talking back and forth, and be like, oh, this really needs a joke, or this needs some sort of line here. And the animatic editor will have an idea and be like, oh, how about this line? And they'll just throw out a line, and then it gets in if it solves the problem. And like, again, I feel like it's a shift back to that thinking of, how can I contribute? What's the thing that I can control? Well, I'm working in this specific capacity. I work on the episode, at this specific stage of production. And this is when I touch it. And this is kind of when I'm directly responsible for adjusting it. And so this is when I can contribute to the process. I can contribute in this way, and I will do the best that I can to throw out ideas, or to solve problems. And I remember being in an animatic room, and there was two writers and myself and the director of the episode and the storyboard artist. And we were like, oh, we need some sort of line here for when these two characters are kissing, and this other character is making kind of an observation of it. And we were like batting stupid ideas back and forth, and nothing was really clicking. And then the PA Caitlin, just threw out like, what if they say, looks like somebody's spaghetti busy because they're eating spaghetti? And we're like, yes, Caitlin, perfect. That goes in. And like, it's not necessarily somebody who like is directly responsible for this particular part of the process, but is there in the room and was able to contribute in the way that they could. And it was perfect, and it was awesome. And like, moving forward, like, we will like ask her for her opinion too, because she contributed, because she put it forward, and like added
awesome
to the process.
One of that just brought back a lot of memories from my experience on Glitch Decks, which is like one of the best productions I've worked on TV, because the creative team, Dan and Eric and Ian, they were all so involved in allowing the team to participate in every aspect. So whether it was the production assistant, or, all the way through the whole team, it's like, if you had a good idea that you wanted to throw out there, they were willing to listen to it. And if it worked really well, they would incorporate it in. It's like, there was no wrong ideas. Like, it was the best idea wins, basically, which is another production team that I worked on a long time ago. That was like their mantra, was the best idea wins. And being in those editorial sessions, about talking with the editor, and we would just throw ideas back and forth, and we would call in people for stunt casting, basically scratch track. And you through that collaboration, you just end up with magic, at times. And that's the fun aspect of animation, where you just have that magical collaboration, everyone, building that fire to make it better, make it better, make it better.
And to answer Kadai's question, do we know which studios features directors teams that involve more parts of the production pipeline, more like that? For me, it's always a crapshoot. You're
Yeah,
never really sure, and
that's right.
you always want to talk to the director or talk to or figure out what the culture is and see what the guide rails are, or see what that production is like, and kind of
Mhm.
suss out and kind of like what's the creative environment like.
Yeah. And to further answer that question, it's like every production that I've ever been on, whether it's TV or feature, is going to be different. So the production environment on one show might be a completely different culture than another show, right? And another feature might be a different culture than another feature. So it all is dependent, as I said earlier, it's all dependent on the collaboration of like who's at the top, like what is the style they like to operate in? Like, do they like a collaborative type of environment, or is it more of a top-down structure? And unfortunately, you don't know because there's so many different productions that you won't know until you're actually on it. So you can't really suss out that, like, oh, if I go to this studio over here, they have more creative collaboration, but if I go to that studio over there, they don't. I mean, there are certain shows that just the way their format is set up, that there will be a little bit more interaction. Like, say, for example, if it's a board-driven show, an 11-minute, you kind of know going in, like, oh, it's board-driven 11 minutes, so there's going to be a lot of dialogue between the director, the storyboard artists, and the creatives and the writers, versus say like a sitcom primetime show where it's more script-driven. Like The Simpsons, it's like the script is a script, and that's it. You don't change dialogue, and if it doesn't work, the writers change it because they want to write something new and funny instead of like what they had that they tried. So there's that kind of thing. But as you get into the industry and you see what jobs are available, that's why it's really important to bounce around, like to
Mm.
try different studios, try different jobs, try different places to work, because if you can, that will build up your experience. And then you'll get to know, what do I like working in? Where do I like working? Where is it the most creative for me? Where do I have the most freedom? And what do I enjoy doing? Um, it's going to help you in the long run. And when you've navigated all those different pipelines, it you can lend that experience to other places.
Mhm. And long term, I mean, the animation industry compared to the entertainment industry is tiny. Like, we are sometimes we're kind of considered the backwaters of the entertainment industry, you know, but it like everybody in our industry talks to each other,
Yeah.
and you want to have a reputation as somebody that is good to work with and can find the middle ground with everybody and can throw out ideas and
Mhm.
can be like and contribute in a positive way and will be like awesome to work with.
Yeah.
Because eventually, like, in a strictly self-protective way, eventually somebody is going to ask somebody else what it was like to work with you, and you want them to say they were really fun to work with. Maybe it
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily a style fit for our show, but they tried really hard and they were great to work with,
Mhm.
and we would hire them again on a different show if it were more of a style fit.
Yeah. They were the best ambassador for their business.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, street cred never goes away.
No, no, it doesn't. I mean, like it takes everything. I just echo everything that Jim said. He summed it up.
Well, any last questions or any last words that you want to share, Phil, with the mentees and with everybody?
Questions for the team or for the mentees. Do they have any further questions? I mean, everyone's. Well, that was the last question.
It seems like, yeah, I think that was the last question of that. There were a couple of specific questions, but I think it goes back to being in touch with yourself and figuring out like what you enjoy to do, and what your part of the process is, like where you can contribute or what you're enjoying, going
Mhm.
internal and saying like, oh, I want to stay with story, or I want to become a background artist, or you know.
Yeah, it's great to be, especially if you're a mentee, or if you can, while you're holding down whatever employment you can to take care of your essential needs, and you work on the areas that you're interested in, and that can change over time. Like sometimes um, you might be really interested in becoming a storyboard artist, and then you go through the process, you become you're working on your own personal storyboards. It's a good way to practice and develop your storytelling skills to get you ready for that next step, which is probably revisions to break in. And then when you get in, then you could continue to work on, you're going to need to continue to develop your craft on your off time. I mean, that's the one thing that they never really told me when I was in art school. They never really said, okay, once you break in, you're good, and you don't have to ever work on your craft again. It's like, no, if you're doing whatever it is you're doing for 8 to 12 hours a day, and then you really want to do something else, whether it be animator or background or character design, you have to practice that on your own time, or take classes and practice and practice and practice, so that you're ready to make that leap when the opportunity affords itself. And then when you get to that job, whatever it is that you were imagining yourself that you wanted to be in, or envisioning yourself to get there, and then you finally get there and you realize, wow, this is maybe not for me. It's not what I thought it was going to be. Maybe I'm doing it and it's like, this is really hard. And you have to then take a step back and assess, is this hard because I never encountered this before? Or is this hard because maybe it's not clicking yet? How long do I want to stick with this? Do I want to give it 6 months to a year? And if you meet that deadline, you're like, okay, I've done this for about a year now. Is this satisfying creatively? If there's something in it that's not satisfying creatively for you, then it's like, okay, what else can you do? What else can you train for? Or where else can you find? I remember listening to your chat with Ashley. She was talking about how she was in HR, and then she moved from HR into production. And she was there for a while and realized, hey, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This may be not my chosen path, because my internal compass is leading me elsewhere. And then she moved back into HR, and she's really enjoying it, thriving, which is essentially what everyone needs to do on their own creative journey for themselves, to find out what it is that they really enjoy doing and how to find that thing, and then fan the fire to keep it going over the ups and downs throughout the whole industry, so that over the course of the history of the industry, so that they can just keep perpetually going and still find the joy in doing it, and it doesn't become a job.
And always be in touch with that joy. It was always a job, yeah. But like, stay in touch with that real joy in yourself, and really always be emotionally in touch with yourself, and understand and figuring out where your fun is, where your personal fun is, where your personal joy is.
Because the thing that blew me away, even from the time when I was a kid, what blew me away was the fact that like these characters would come to life on screen, like from drawings. Like the drawings would come together, and then the characters would be alive, And when I saw that you could do that in animation, I was like, holy crap, like it's alive, it's moving, And then when you see that take place in a storyboard, and you're moved emotionally from a storyboard that's not fully animated, and you're just like, I'm feeling what the character's feeling, or I'm feeling the emotion of this scene. You're just like, damn, like I want to be able to do that, like that's awesome.
It's magic.
It's magic. It's magic. Absolutely.
Awesome. Phil, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you for your time. Everybody, we're going to wrap it up. Some of the questions, if you go to our Story for All YouTube channel, some of them we've answered. A couple of those. We have like you mentioned, like the talk with Rachel Ashley. There are she goes a lot into like what recruiters want to see on the website, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, we're going to do a lot more of these too. If you follow the story mentorship, the Story for All mentorship is just twitter.com/story mentorship. You'll see all the future talks. And there will be information there. We're in the middle. A couple of people asked about becoming a mentee. We're in the middle of a mentorship cycle. So we don't know the future of this, but we will probably do another mentorship round sometime soon. So stay tuned. So Phil, thank you. Thank you again so much for your time. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim, for inviting me on. And thanks everyone for attending and listening to me go. I look forward to hearing all, how this goes. So
and if they want to reach you on Twitter.
Yeah, I can see. I think my Twitter is it's just at Alora Philip. Hold on a second, let me just share my screen real quick, because I know I'd probably mangle it if I was like, if I was gonna read it out loud, because share. There we go. So that's where you can find me online on Instagram or on Twitter, and just yeah, drop a line, say hi.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the Saturday. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Hope you get some
It's been
video
a pleasure.
gaming timing. And thanks, everybody. Talk to everybody soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.